And welcome along to another video here with me, Jennifer Kirk. I'm going to be doing a box opening and a little bit of a review here today. And it's been a while since we've done one of these. I've been ever so busy, but nice of you to stick on in there with me. And without further ado, let's take a look at what today's new toy is. And look at this. Isn't this wonderful? This is the Hornby Train Pack, the Bristolian. And well, it's not an actual train set, and it's something I think a lot of people might assume that looking at the pictures on websites. All you get in this is you'll get the locomotive and 3 coaches. There's no track, there's no controller, and it's a brilliant way of adding a complete instant train to a collection. And what particularly attracted me to this is the really quite keen prices that it's currently available from a number of online retailers. But this particular one, this came from Rails of Sheffield, and they were doing it for less than half of its RRP. And in fact, to the point where you were paying what the current RRP is for the King locomotive, and you're getting 3 coaches, which again, for RRP over £40 each, you were effectively getting those without needing to pay any extra. Now, it is a limited edition of 1,000, we can see up in the top corner, but that's actually quite a lot. And what I've noticed is that a lot of shops are breaking up these packs, so you can buy the locomotive separately and the coaches separately, and it might be interesting to see in the long term just how many of these survive as is. But the new Hornby King is a locomotive that I've actually had my eye on for a little while now, so it was a good opportunity to get one, and the 3 coaches to go with it, well, that's just a bonus. So this pack is R3401, and we've got this quite nice printed outer box, and if you look right back, I think one of the very first box opening and reviews that we ever did was the Hornby Northumbrian pack, which is out of a similar ilk. Now, the Bristolian was a crack express that the Great Western introduced in 1935, and this was in the centenary of their formation in 1835. And initially it was pulled by the King locomotive, normally comprised of 7 coaches, and I'm interested to see whether Hornby will release an additional coach pack to go with this to bring the train length up to the full length. I haven't seen any trace of that as of yet, but it may yet still come. Now, what the Great Western found was that actually a Castle class locomotive was more than adequate to pull this particular train. So it wasn't until the 1950s when BR reintroduced the King class locomotive onto this service. And it has to be said that some of you may remember from the days of Hornby 00 that the Bristolian train set, they did produce that in BR livery, but with a Castle class locomotive. But we have here the set in its original Great Western, guys, with the locomotive King Charles II. Now I'm going to open it from its outer packaging quite carefully. This is somewhat flimsy card, and it can be easy to tear the card. And you know me, I like to keep the boxes. So I'm going to slide that out, put that to one side. And we've got the bump that's come there from Rails of Sheffield. But it does come with quite a nice individually numbered certificate. And it's actually quite a heavy grade of card there. And this one here, I've got number 673 out of 1,000. And I don't know whether they're being sent out roughly in numerical order, or whether or not it's just simply a case that they're all jumbled up and they've just been picked out, whichever one happened to be on the top of the pile. I don't know that, but it doesn't really matter to me. And we get a nice little bit of interesting backstory there, pretty much what I've already told you. And then we also get the instructions for principally maintenance instructions on the locomotive. We've got a piece of card on here, and I've already loosened this up. So I'm going to turn this around. This is going to get a little bit awkward, so let's see, there we go. Remove that piece of card. And we can see in here we've got the polystyrene insert, and it's probably really horrible and shiny on the camera, but there's this quite strange slippery plastic that just protects all these when they're getting inserted and taken out of the tray. And then we've also got, and a little bit at the side here, some of the detailing pack there for the locomotive. We have etched nameplates there for the King, 6009. Which would be a nice addition. I've not bothered as of yet to fit any of this. We've got the front coupling as well there to fit into the NEM pocket. and a few little extra bits and pieces of detail. I'll just put that in there to keep it safe and out of the way. And on the other side, what we've also got here is the close coupling mechanisms that Hornby have been providing with their super detail coaches since really since the L&E Artiques first turned up. So if you want to semi-permanently couple this rake a little bit closer, they give you a full set that's good for the entire rake. Now, to get these out, it's quite easy. Just cradle it in the plastic and pull on out. And we've got these locomotives in the wonderful Great Western Railway with the shirt button logo in the late 1930s with the white roofs, and we've got the Bristolian coach boards on there. Now that is of course in keeping with the train as it first was running in the 1930s. Now the headboard, which if you're familiar with the Castle class locomotive version that Hornby 00 produced, the Bristolian, those didn't arrive until in the 1950s under BR, so not having that in the Great Western Railway livery set is perfectly accurate. And what we've got in here, we've got our left-handed and right-handed brake thirds, and I'll talk a little bit more about them as we get them out of the box. I'm going to get everything out, and then it's easier to discard some of this packaging and be much freer to actually talk about some of these. And there we've got our first third composite. Just put that to one side. And then our other handed brake third. The locomotive itself here, it's something I need to say is that the coupling is permanent between them. It's not as bad as the older Hornby super detail models where they have a cable connecting from tender to locomotive for tender pickups, and usually things like if you want to fit them with DCC sound, it's obviously a good location for the sound chip. But a lot of locomotives, because the drawbar just unhooked itself and would then probably go unnoticed, it put a lot of strain on that cable, and there was a lot of problems with the loose connection developing on that tender connection cable. But with this, the drawbar is screwed in on both locomotive and tender, but even so, you're going to have to be quite careful getting this out. There are some holes, as you can see there, for where the coaches were, for just giving it a push from behind, but it is a very tight fit, so getting this out, I'm going to have to wiggle that around a bit and try and get the tender to move as well. You really need 3 hands. Right, got the locomotive cradled there. Let's try and get that tender out. And there is a lot of factory fitted detail on these. There is a little bit on the fragile side, so we just have to be quite careful. Now, yeah, there we are, we've got it out. So let's just get that out and put that down there. Right, excellent. I can now get all of this put out of the way, and we've got a bit of space there to look at these. I'll leave the coaches until afterwards, so let's focus for now on the locomotive. Great Western Railway livery, shirt button logo, consistent with late 1930s. So this would be pretty much immediately pre Second World War. We've got a lovely applied Swindon green with the lining, and the lining is ever so crisp. This was a new model, completely new, that Hornby brought out. They did previously have a model of the King in their range from, I think, going back to certainly 1980s, possibly even before. And it was probably good for its time, but it was beginning to show being a little bit more toy-like compared to some of the much more newer offerings. So it was a welcome addition that Hornby completely retooled it from scratch. Now, I am aware that DJ Models also announced, in partnership with Happens, a King locomotive, and these two kind of, certainly during the design stage, went a little bit head-to-head. The Hornby one reached the market first. In fact, I'm not quite sure, as of filming this, whether the DJ Models one has actually reached the market, but certainly a lot of people are very, very happy with the Hornby offering. And certainly with the really quite keen price that it can be got at from the Bristolian set in this instance, but also a number of the other liveries as well are available, the locomotive only. I've seen them down to around the £89 mark, which for a locomotive, certainly a large express tender locomotive with this level of finish and detail is actually quite good in the present economic climate. Now we've got all of the usual Swindon fittings. We've got the copper chimney cap, and we've got the brass dome there around the safety valves, and they are finished in different colours. The copper actually does look like metallic copper to me, and I'm looking at it, I think it is painted. In fact, looking at it, there's a little, tiny little bit of overpaint around there, but you have to go looking for it to see it. And it's a different colour paint from this, obviously representing the brass. And I think that is something that is very, very nicely done. We've got individually applied whistles there. And the level of detail here, really, they've gone above and beyond the call of duty on this one. And I think in part that was because they knew that their model would always be judged against the DJ Models version, and that was going to be the all bells and whistles rendition of the model. So it was probably as well that they really took the time and effort. Now we've got fully sprung buffers, front and back. Now there's a little bit of packaging in there. I'm going to take that out, and that's just a little block of polystyrene. We've got a coal load modelled here, and it actually does look like it's been filled up from a coaling stage. So rather than just being some generically applied pile of plastic, this is actually, it looks like real coal. Now you could improve that by adding some crushed up coal dust, but in all honesty with you, I don't think that's going to be necessary. And I can feel it moving there. It is a separately applied piece, and I'm going to see if I can get that out, because I suspect that it does come out. Now I'm going to turn this round. I can feel it moving. In fact, I can see it moving, but it doesn't quite want to come out. So I'm going to try and do this in a way that you can see as well as me. So it's probably just a way of levering it out. Very keen not to break it for obvious reasons. That is a tight fit. It's rather annoying in its fit in a way, because I can feel it's supposed to come out. I really don't want to force it. No, I'm going to leave that be. I really don't want to break it. Now, if you're really determined to have this locomotive running with a nearly empty tender, then it does appear that that comes out, and I have no doubt that underneath Hornby will have modelled accurately the actual bay underneath for you to put in a dusting of coal dust, something like that, to give an idea of a locomotive that's been on a journey, coal used up. Let's see what else we've got. We've got handrails down here, and these are separately applied, pretty fine wire handrails, and they really are just truly stunning. And when you're picking this locomotive up, I do urge you, be very, very careful, because they are so slender and fragile that I'm frightened that I'm going to break these accidentally. There's pretty much no parting seam across the top of the boiler. In fact, I'm looking very carefully. I can't really see any great marks in any way showing where it's been released from the tool. There are some lines on the sides, and I'll be honest with you, I think they're actually modelling where the different panels on the boiler cladding would have been put together on the real thing. I'm not entirely sure about that, but certainly, in fact, they're prominent enough that I am actually pretty convinced that they must be accurate depictions of what the real one looks like. And this is probably one of the first times I've seen a model with no parting line along the top of the boiler, so that is actually quite impressive in its own little way. One of the other things that I've noticed underneath here, and I don't know how well you can see on the camera, if you look underneath the boiler there, we've got a full representation of the internal valve gear that's going on in there, painted out in the red, and it really is truly beautiful to behold. We've got all of that detail in there. It probably doesn't, in fact I'm certain it doesn't go round when you run this locomotive, but you have to get ever so close to see that, and really that is quite a nice development that we now see in these newer high quality models that are coming from the likes of Bachmann and Hornby. The front face of the locomotive, in my opinion, they've captured that pretty accurately indeed. It really does look the part. I'm struggling here at all to find any great fault with this locomotive. And in fact, to be honest with you, there is nothing that I can find as a downside with the way it's been put together and executed. Now, there's probably people who are really big aficionados of this class who are looking and go, yeah, well, there's one too many rivets there, or that is 0.5 of a nanometer out of line. But to you and me, I'll be honest, this locomotive is about as good as you're going to get for the money as a representation of a Castle class locomotive. And really, a lot of the detail underneath as well. We've got the tender water scoops there. The brake rigging, I showed you that in the box. You can apply that yourself. They are often very, very fiddly. And unless you're going to look very closely at these locomotives, in all honesty with you, I tend to find that sometimes, especially if you're going to run it a lot, take it on and off the track a lot, it may be best just to leave that to one side. One little niggle here, and this is purely from a practicality point of view. The front bogie, as you can see there, has a habit of getting jammed at weird angles. So you're going to have to be quite careful, especially when putting it on the track, because it's got a centre pivot there, and it has a full range of movement. But if you're not careful, that's going to end up, it just seems to sort of jam at weird angles. I can probably almost turn this completely the wrong way round. I mean, obviously in real life it wouldn't do that. In fact, yeah, there you are. It has a very great range of movement, but it's trying not to get it jammed there. But it's actually a fairly faithful representation of the manner with which the actual full-sized real King front bogies were put together. And we've got this very distinctive inner frame, outer frame, sort of S-shaped bogie frames on there, and that's something which really is very distinctive for the King and makes it quite easy to set them apart from the Castle class, which had inside frames throughout both of the front axles on that bogie. We've got metal coupling rods. And actually, this area here is something that I've always found with the Hornby 00 model, which is what I was familiar with growing up, the Bristol Castle and the Cardiff Castle and the Denbigh Castle. This is an area which is very easy to get wrong in the interests of making it quite strong and resilient in model form, but end up making it look a little bit toy-like. And Hornby have not fallen into that trap with this. This actually looks just like the real thing. And it's very, very delicate in there. I've actually oiled this. When I test ran it, just to make sure all was well, I always, as a matter of principle, oil all of these little joints, everything that moves on the valve gear, because they're so slender and accurate to the full-size model that I'm always frightened that they're going to break very easily with running. So I just give those a little bit of an oiling. We've also got, I believe this is the injector, the boiler injector, for forcing water into the boiler when the locomotive is in steam. And that, again, is nicely applied as an actual three-dimensional piece. Quite often, certainly in the past, these were just moulded on as an afterthought, almost as a representation. But here, it really is some impressive detail in there. And you can also see, as I'm holding it upside down, we've got that permanently attached tender drawbar. And what you can see there is they're on a flathead screw, and there is actually a second hole there. So you can close up the coupling between the tender and locomotive if you've got much more generous curves, or indeed if you're wanting to just put this into a display cabinet, it's possible to set them so that they're much closer together. The couplings themselves, they're set in NEM pockets, so very easy to replace if you wanted to put in different couplings of your own. We can also see here, I talked about this when I was taking it out of the box, the wire that goes between the two. Now, there are actually tender pickups on all of the wheels, as well as the 6 driving wheels on the locomotive. And this means that when you're running it, there's no stutter as it goes through any kind of point work or dead spots on the track. This is a super silky, smooth running locomotive. And really, it's nice to see on these tender locomotives that these tender pickups are being fitted as standard, because it really does improve the performance no end. On the back of the driving wheels, we can see we've got these phosphor bronze wipers, and they are actually below the level of where the brake rigging would be applied. So it's something actually that has been said about the new Bachmann coal tank. Now, I don't have one of those just yet to review, but there's been a lot of complaints about these catching on things like check rails and points. Well, on the Hornby King, they have very thoughtfully put them in such a position that there is no real risk of these getting caught on anything and getting bent, and they are a nightmare actually. When they do get caught and bent, it's very difficult to reset them back against the backs of the wheels. So it's nice to see that a lot of thought has been put in at every level with this locomotive. Now that front bogie, actually, I can feel there, it does feel quite a heavy casting, and that does mean when I've been running it, it really does hold the track really, really well. Now we've got the separately applied name boards there on the splashes of the locomotive, and in the separate detail pack I've also noticed that we've got there a tempo printed number, and for the likes of me I'm quite happy with that. But if you're really keen to have a representation of the actual cast nameplates that the full size locomotives carried, they have given you a set of that detailing pack, which does allow you to apply them yourself, and you can see them just, it's being very annoying there. I don't know how well they'll show up, but we've got actual etched number plates there on the detailing pack, and that really is a nice touch, and it really caters for pretty much any kind of an enthusiast of this locomotive that wants a different levelling of detailing without having to go out and purchase these as aftermarket items. Overall, I have to say, this locomotive, for me, the only niggles are really just niggles that have been brought about by just how accurate they've tried to make this model. And that's things like we talked about, that front bogie. And it's really a niggle only in the practicality sense of running this and handling this thing, and not in the sense that it does not detract from the actual aesthetic look of the locomotive in any way. And actually, once you've got it on the track and it's running and you leave it well alone, it does run pretty reliably. So it's so good to see that they've managed to get aesthetic accuracy in there as well as practicality. And one thing before we move on to the coaches, I just want to bring up is, it's very difficult to show that, but inside the cab there's actually a lot of separately fitted detail in there. It's certainly painted up with all the different pipes and fittings picked out in the different colours, but certainly the regulator is a separately applied piece, and that is just superb level of attention to detail. Now, I'm going to put this to one side, and let's have a look at the coaches. We've got 3 in this pack. As I said at the beginning, the full train back in the 1930s through to the 1950s would have typically been formed of 7 coaches, but, you know, economies of money, if you bought a pack like this with 7 coaches, it would cost an awful lot more, and quite frankly most people wouldn't have the space on their layout to really run a single train that long. Now, what have we got here? We've got well, let's deal with this coach first. This is the Composite Coach, and that basically means that we've got 3rd class accommodation and 1st class accommodation. Now, these are Colletts, and again, unlike in the past that Hornby has had a really bad habit of introducing train packs where it's a mix of super detailed new models with some of the older, little bit tired models, in this case, the entire pack is kitted out with brand new models. And in this particular case, they're brand new Collett coaches, and these are tooled up to an incredibly high standard, actually to the point where you can see there, this is pretty much the first time I have ever seen sprung buffers on an item of rolling stock as opposed to a locomotive. There's only a small amount of movement there, and this really is a little bit of an indulgence of detail for the sake of detail. But we'll let it slide because we got this for such a good price. The livery application, it's quite a simple livery. We've got the cream and chocolate brown, which is the Great Western colours from the 1930s period. And certainly also by the 1950s, when the Bristolian was reintroduced with the King locomotives, as opposed to the Castle locomotives that have pulled it before. British Rail actually did reintroduce this livery for some of the Mark I coaches. But we're looking here at the Collett. They've got very distinctive bogies, and this is another area where in the past model companies have tended to have a generic bogie that's used on everything. Not so here. What we've got is this four-wheel Collett bogie, and it's quite short, much shorter than the Mark I's, for example. And we've got this, well, it is a Spartan underframe detail, but it is accurate. And that is nicely done. We've got the battery boxes, dynamos, things like that, and also the vacuum brakes. Now, what I can also see under here is there's a lot of holes in the moulding, and that's typical for the other coaches as well. And I think that there's different options that are kind of going to be available in the pipeline for the Collett coaches, representing them later on in their life, but also I suspect that some of these are for a restaurant car version, which the Bristolian should have, but it isn't included in this set. We've got the GWR shirt button logo there, printed accurately in the middle, and that is really, really crisply done. And also we've got all the firsts and the thirds and the numbers all crisply applied. These little handles, these are also separately applied detail. They're not moulded on, but it has to be said, Hornby has actually been quite good with some of this moulded on detail in the past. So really I wouldn't have been bothered if these had been moulded on, because Hornby have proven that they're able to do these to a very high standard. We've got our separately applied roof boards, saying there the Bristolian. These do come factory applied. And these actual roof fittings, these again, separately applied detail. And it is really, really nicely done, all picked out there in this lovely, slightly off-white colour. The wheels in the bogies, they're metal wheels. We've also got close coupling mechanisms, pretty similar to the Bachmann coaches and a lot of the other super detail Hornby coaches. You can see the coupling as you go around a tighter corner. A spring mechanism sort of pushes it out a little bit. It's all nicely done, and really I can't say there's any detraction in my mind from these. Right, we're going to put the first third composite to one side. One thing I will draw attention to, and this comes into play when we talk about the other two coaches. We've got central corridor connections on these coaches, but the actual corridor goes down one side, which we can see here with these slightly wider windows, and you can see the internal representation of the compartments and the corridors. Now, when we get to the brake thirds, what we can see is that we've got a right hand and a left hand. So we've got our brake compartments there, both at that end, but this one you see the corridor is on this side, and this one, it's on the other side. And this is so, when the full train is assembled, I'm not going to put the composite in there, but then we can have a brake compartment at either end, but the corridor will be on the same side of the entire train, and that's why these are handed, as it were, and that is true to how the full-sized ones would have been. And I think possibly in part it's to do with when the train's pulling into a station, it's having the corridor on a particular side, the full length of the train, so people aren't trying to get onto the train maybe through compartments or anything like that. But also I think the GWR, as far as they were concerned, aesthetics were everything in terms of the presentation. They were very big on that. So it was just neat to have the entire train with the corridor all on one side. As to the other fittings on these, very similar to the separately applied fittings on the composite first third. So there's not really much else to say about those. We've got the narrow tension lock couplings in NEM pockets fitted throughout the train. I can't really say anything to detract, and this is something I know people have said in the past. It's like, well, if it's perfect, if you can't find anything wrong with it, why didn't it get 10 out of 10? Well, up until now, there's always been a little bit of something there that's just prevented me from giving a Jenny Kirk seal of approval. And in this instance, I think we've got a winner here. I think we've got a train here from Hornby where they've pulled out all the stops, and I'm going to give it 10 out of 10. And the price as well really just takes it for me. Being available from some of these internet and shop-based retailers at prices that are really We haven't seen prices like these for 5, 6, 7 years. There's just no excuse. If you have any kind of an inkling that you want a King locomotive and Collett coaches in your collection, this really is the perfect set. I can't speak more highly of this. I can find nothing wrong, and the price is incredibly keen. So here we have it. The very first Jenny Kirk seal of approval, 10 out of 10. I really can't rate this more highly. And it's certainly the case that if you've been waiting out for perhaps a little bit more detail on these before you made a decision on buying them, really, what are you waiting for? If you want a King, you want Collett coaches, the price is just incredible. It cannot be beaten, it will not be beaten. And if you let the man with the bargains pass you by, you will be very, very disappointed when these do eventually sell out. And I'm actually quite surprised that they haven't sold out already, because really, this model deserves to sell out and sell out quickly, because it is just so good in every respect. Anyway, I'm going to stop gushing like some kind of a fangirl over this. And I'm going to say to you, if you like this video, don't forget to like it, share it too, and subscribe to the channel, and you'll be the first to see new videos as and when they go up. And also, just to answer some of the people say, oh, we want to see some footage of it running. Well, that's going to be coming up in a future video, and we're going to have this full train pack going around in the shed, and we're going to get some really, really good shots of that. But until then, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying thank you very much for watching and enjoying my videos, and you take very good care of yourself. Until next time, bye for now.